I am a coal miner's daughter.
Well, I was born a coal miner's daughter.
Well, not exactly. I was actually born in Indianapolis, Indiana, the child of Kentucky expatriates. Because when a poor Kentucky coal miner decides he's had enough of strikes and union violence, he goes north to the big cities. I was raised on the east side of that parochial Midwestern town, in an area so populated by other Kentucky refugees that it was sometimes called Little Kentucky. As a daughter, their expectations for me were simple. Do your chores. Learn to run a household. And above all, when you became old enough, find a man. Because to my Appalachian-born mother, marriage to the right man promised everything. Home, a family, security, safety, and prosperity. Or so I was told. My love of books began as my sister read aloud to Douglas, my younger brother, and me. It seemed like magic that words and images came from markings on a printed page. She sat next to me and traced the words with her finger as she read Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. I followed along and learned the words. The, here, grass, and milk. My parents took a tolerant view of this. A little reading, they supposed, might come in handy sometime. And it probably wasn't dangerous.
Henry VIII ain't going to walk in here and wash them dishes.
That is our mother speaking. My sister is sitting at the kitchen table, reading aloud from our Norton Anthology of English Literature. I, now 12, am standing at the sink, lost in the story and in her words. The stacks of dirty dishes, all but forgotten. Of all our books, my mother hated the Norton most. She found nothing splendorous in the beautiful picture of Henry's own daughter Elizabeth, all decked out as the fairy queen on the cover. My mother definitely had this thing against the royal family of England.
If you think Queen Elizabeth is going to spread up that bed, you got another think coming.
Ah, but in the kitchen my mother reigned, and the house always smelled of sweet country cooking. One such culinary delight was known as cathead biscuits, so called because when pulled from the oven puffy and golden brown, they were the size and color of a ginger cat's head. They were delicious, and I loved them, dripping with butter and homemade blackberry jam. One morning my mother set the oven to warm to prepare for the daily baking. It's amazing how fast smoke can fill a house. There in the oven, burned just beyond legibility, was our beloved Norton. It had seemed like such a good idea to hide it there the previous evening, safely out of sight, in order to spare my sister and me from yet another of my mother's tirades against the British royals. Yes, such a good idea, at the time. But gone were any remaining doubts about the dangerous nature of our association with books. Under their influence, we had almost burned down the house. Anything between bound covers was, to my mother, a waste of time.
You have as much use of them books as a hog has a side saddle.
So when things got a little too hot at home, we retreated to the local library. The books we brought home irritated her. The records drove her crazy. Music by Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, and Debussy, Sir Laurence Olivier reading Shakespeare, and even J.R.R. Tolkien's songs of Middle-earth. I once overheard my mother talking about us to her sister.
Daisy, my children are freaks. They get that from their daddy's side of the family. Ma Brassfield was moonstruck too.
I later learned that Melvina, Ma Brassfield, was not only literate, but actually taught at the Berry Schoolhouse on Meadow Creek in Rockholds, Kentucky. Moonstruck indeed. As high school drew to a close, I could not tell my mother that I planned to marry the tall boy who sat with me on the porch and listened to my hopes and dreams for the future. I told her I wanted to go to college. "You can't go to college. No one in our family's ever gone to college. Besides, you don't have the money." But I was at the library so much anyway that the head librarian finally gave me a job. And in my senior year of high school, there came a state scholarship and a federal grant. I worked all the hours I could. And when there was no money for books that first semester, and my mother's hope ran high that I could finally put this college nonsense behind me, the tall boy, who remembered my dreams, borrowed money from his mother and showed up outside my first English class with my freshman books in his arms. But my education, which I thought would take me away, kept bringing me back. And in the years that followed, and in the books I read as an English major, I met my family again. In Pride and Prejudice, I recognized my mother in poor Mrs. Bennet's obsession with getting her daughters well married. From half a world away, in the genteel England of another time, Jane Austen helped me better understand the Kentucky housewife who was my mother.
Oh, I knew it would all come out right in the end. Oh, my dear, dear Lydia. She will be married. Oh, my good, kind brother. I knew how it would be.
Charles Dickens' novel David Copperfield was written nearly 100 years before my father was born, and yet there he was, in the character of Mr. Barkis, who kept his odd treasures and his dreams locked in a trunk of old clothes.
I'm a poor man, sir.
And I am sorry to hear it.
Very poor indeed. Old clothes. I wish it's full of money, but it ain't. It's old clothes.
I understand.
There were other books, too. I read Night Comes to the Cumberlands by Harry M. Caudle, and began to better understand who my parents were and where they had come from.
The land wore out, and the people went to the mines, and then mining was mechanized, and about 2/3 of the people became superfluous. One of those thirds left, and the other is still here on relief. They and their descendants are waiting for something to happen, and nothing ever happens.
My father was one who left, and by doing so set the stage for me. And in the 4 years that followed, as I worked and worried about money, scholarship, grants, and grades, I found allies. My sister was one of them. She'd had enough of schooling, but not of learning, and she and I spent long hours discussing topics in history and literature, fleshing out many of my college papers in the process. Some of my teachers and friends were themselves Kentucky expatriates, or their offspring, who had chosen another path for themselves. From them I found both pride and humor in my history. We even told stories and jokes about our hillbilly upbringing.
How is my hand like a lemon pie? It's got meringue on it.
Of course, having all been raised in country kitchens, there was plenty of bragging about our mother's fried chicken, biscuits, pan gravy, and cornbread. The fast food and pizza we usually settled for was a sorry substitute. When I graduated from college, there was no familial fanfare, no tearful parent watching me as I accepted my diploma. But the next time I went home, my mother made a big platter of cathead biscuits and served them to me with plenty of butter and homemade blackberry jam. I love them still.